Lebollo, or initiation, is a traditional institution involving the process of initiating young men into adult roles. The activities, which span a minimum period of 6 months, happen on a mountain away from the disturbances of village life for maximum concentration and increased chances of attaining training objectives. Initiation schools are indigenous, that they are embedded in local history and is laden with integrated systems of cognition, beliefs and practices of specific communities.
Indawo ezivulekile nazo umkhonto ke ngoku ozawusebenza phakathi kwemilenze uphatha into engaka funeka uphathe into engaka so ikhombisa uba ingena phakathi kwemilenze ngoku xa ifika ungena phakathi kwemilenze ubambile ngohlobo ungena ngentloko nantsi into engidlela ngentloko futhi lena indawo isebenzi tu le.
During this period, the initiates are forbidden to visit their homes. Their only contact with family is through visits paid to the school by members of the same sex who have themselves undergone initiation. It is worth mentioning that this indigenous education system was organized more as single-sex schools. Men's initiation and girls' initiation happen separately. This situation probably served to entrench the distinctive caricatures of masculine and feminine virtues that are indispensable to cherish social goals.
We want our daughters to stick to the rules of life, to grow under our guidance. We want them to stay away from boys. We want to teach them on how to approach life and also skilling them. We are preparing them to be better wives that can handle pressures they will have to encounter when they get married.
The role of initiation schools in societal development has been undermined by those who fail to recognize that it is by such knowledge that indigenous people have survived for centuries, is a systematic form of knowledge production and transfer, which was instituted to ensure that the sustainability of nations was not left to chance, but was rather a well-orchestrated symphony of principles. During the pre-Western education era, the education of an African child was integral to the functions of families and communities. People lived to educate other people, while mothers and fathers, grandmothers and grandfathers were entrusted with the responsibility to provide appropriate education at appropriate stages in life. Initiation became the highest band of the education of youngsters. It was actually the pinnacle of the socialization process. It thus became a high-profile endeavor that attracted the participation of most citizens within a given society. The prime purpose of the ceremony was to initiate young men to be effective role players in the sustainable and continued existence of their societies. Preparation for adulthood encompassed marriage counseling, sexuality education, herbology, as well as law and democracy. A variety of strategies became the means to this end, but they all culminated in the chief intent, namely the purification of the human body and soul, which would in turn eliminate any interference threatening to destabilize the natural tranquility of cosmic existence. One of the principles canvassed at the initiation schools was cleanliness, both in its literal form as it relates to the hygienic way of living and in its metaphorical form as it relates to the purging of mind and soul, inner self. The physiological aspect of purification was achieved through lessons on acceptable hygienic practices such as washing one's hands prior to handling food, for instance, but it was also implemented through the circumcision of male initiates. The medical benefit of circumcision is therefore not a phenomenon of Western health systems, but has been understood and encouraged by indigenous Africans for centuries. The purification of the soul happened through the installation of principles such as honesty and trustworthiness. One of the strategies used to discourage unacceptable behavior was to tell folktales that portrayed the consequences of negative conduct. A popular traditional folktale about a boy who fell pregnant and bore a child after tasting a medicine that he had been sent to deliver to a relative at another village an example of how fear was used to discourage unwanted value systems, plus or minus in this case. Untrustworthiness. The absence of the written genre meant that initiates had to remember all they were taught, including praise poems and the history of their nations. The initiates were taught to think strategically and often on their feet. The ability to think strategically and at a high level was of paramount importance, since one of the duties for which men were being prepared was to serve on the chief's cabinet. Cognitive skills were evoked by way of problem-based education. During the period of initiation, learners were posed a variety of problems that typified the life of societies, and they were expected to provide possible solutions. It is a fact that most higher education institutions are only now starting to adopt problem-based education as a didactical strategy. So, in a sense, initiation has been more sophisticated than most people realize. Initiation gains its credence from the fact that the education there was tailored to unravel individual talents and positive constructs. For example, each initiate was assisted to develop a personal vision to signify a rebirth or a repositioning, readying him to confront life successfully. To this effect, each initiate acquired a new name, which in a sense was a proclamation of how he hoped to contribute to society. The enhancement of personal as well as communal traits was one of the objectives of the ceremony. Hard work, respect for all, humility, perseverance, service to one's nation, and patriotism were some of the traits that were nurtured at initiation schools. This was achieved by, amongst other things, role modeling. The facilitators at initiation schools were elderly men of substantial political, economic, and social standing, openly known paragons of virtues. Initiation subjects one to a maximum physiological and psychological threshold through occasional deprivation of some basic needs like food, water, sleep, and affection, while at the same time one is expected to stay focused on the cause and think strategically about issues. Despised as it was, dropping out became an option for some initiates who would run away from the schools, only to discover that society did not stop short of ostracizing them. Dropouts were vehemently shunned and severely punished for abandoning a worthy cause. While many of the African cultures were ravaged by the mighty power of Western education, initiation remains one of the few systems that have proved impenetrable. Hence the mystical speculations that were created to depict the institution as some diabolical entity beset with barbaric practices. Nevertheless, there is nothing dubious about the activities at initiations. While I could not divulge further details, the ability to sustain confidentiality was a powerful lever for the preservation of what counted as unique to a nation. War strategies are some of the national secrets that males had to harbor. This high level of confidentiality is the security of patent rights for a school system and strategic issues that were uniquely African. The Indigenous society appreciated knowledge for what it was worth. The fact that there was no failing student at the initiation school was indicative of this fact. The fundamental principle was that every human being was endowed with some kind of talent which could be unearthed. To facilitate the discovery of individual talents, each initiate was designated an instructor, mentor, who had to ensure that at the end of the schooling the initiate, his fellow initiates, as well as the instructors knew exactly where the individual's strengths laid. The graduation day was an exhibition of competencies demonstrated by way of poems. As much as the documentary focuses on male initiation only, we hope the preservation of the ceremony of both male and female initiation in its purest forms is preserved and continues, even through the number of fertilities that we see these days. Thanks for watching the channel. Please like, share, and subscribe for more African documentaries.